So you want to become a movie director? Here's the fantasy. Your name goes above the title. Every shot, every performance, every decision on screen traces back to you. Total creative control. Here's the catch nobody puts in the trailer. On your first film, you don't legally get to decide what's actually in it. The money does. And it's not just first-timers. Even directors who've already won an Oscar have had scenes overwritten after the fact. Sometimes years after the film already premiered, a version gets quietly re-released that isn't the one they originally handed in. The industry has a name for that gap between what a director made and what audiences actually saw. It's not rare. It's practically routine. So today we're figuring out something specific. How do you actually get someone to hand you a camera and a budget? Who really has the power once the cameras start rolling? And once the movie is finished, whose movie is it actually? Let's find out. It usually starts small. You're a teenager with your dad's camera, or just your phone, filming your friends doing something dumb in a backyard. You cut it together at midnight. You watch it back 15 times. Nobody taught you what a shot composition is. You just know when something looks right and when it doesn't. You start noticing things you never noticed before. How a scene in your favorite movie holds a shot 2 seconds longer than it needs to, just to make you uncomfortable on purpose. How a single cut can completely change the meaning of the scene before it. That feeling is the whole appeal of this job. Total authorship. Nobody rewriting your choices. Your vision, exactly as you saw it in your head, on a screen. Every person who has ever wanted to direct wants that same thing, which raises an obvious question. If the director's name is the only one on the poster, why do so few directors actually control what's on the screen? Let's start with how you even get there. Nobody hands a 22-year-old a studio budget because they made a cool video in their backyard. So you make short films instead. You enter festivals. You beg favors from anyone who owns a camera, knows an actor, or has a garage you can shoot in for free. Most of this happens with zero pay and often zero sleep. You're doing a full-time job during the day and directing on nights and weekends, hoping one festival programmer, one producer, one stranger with actual money notices what you made. If any of this is starting to sound like exactly the kind of thing you'd want broken down for other professions too, that's what this channel is for. Hit subscribe and you won't miss the next one. If you're lucky, and genuinely good, someone eventually lets you make a real feature. Except real is generous. We're usually talking about a micro-budget film held together with credit card debt and unpaid favors. Maybe you shoot in your own apartment because you can't afford a location fee. Maybe your cast is made up of friends working for a cut of a profit that will probably never exist. Maybe you're doing 3 jobs on set at once because you can't afford to hire anyone else. Here's the part that people don't expect. This film isn't your masterpiece. It's your audition tape. Nobody is expecting perfection. They're watching to see if you can survive the process of actually making one. That's the first filter. Most people who dream about directing never even clear it. They talk about the film they're gonna make far longer than they ever actually make one. So let's say the gamble works. Somebody with real money hands you a real budget. What happens the second the cameras actually start rolling? This is where it gets complicated. So let's work through it properly, because the numbers here are more interesting than they first look. The Directors Guild of America represents roughly 19,500 people. Sounds like a lot. Except that number includes directors, assistant directors, unit production managers, stage managers. The actual working feature directors inside that number are a much smaller slice, closer to a few thousand people trying to share the handful of studio films that get greenlit in any given year. And even once you're in that smaller slice, being hired once does not mean being hired again. A huge number of directors make exactly one studio film and never get a second chance. One bad opening weekend, and the phone stops ringing. Getting a project greenlit in the first place is its own maze. A studio has to believe the script works, believe the budget is justified, believe a cast can be attached that audiences will actually pay to see, and believe all of that will still hold true 2 or 3 years later when the film actually releases. Any one of those beliefs falling apart can quietly kill a project you've already spent a year developing. Here's the mechanism behind that. Films are financed with insurance in place, something called a completion bond. If a director goes over schedule, over budget, or simply loses the confidence of the people paying for the film, the bond company has the contractual right to remove that director and finish the film without them. It exists because financing a movie is a genuinely risky bet, and the people putting up tens of millions of dollars want to guarantee the thing actually gets finished, with or without the person who dreamed it up. From their side, it's not personal. It's just how you ensure a project that could otherwise collapse halfway through. Take a second to sit with that. The person legally allowed to fire the director from their own movie, mid-shoot, is often an insurance company nobody in the audience will ever hear of. So on set, you look like the authority. You're the one saying action and cut. But somewhere off camera, there's a financial structure that can override you before lunch. Which raises the real question. If the person funding the movie can override you during the shoot itself, Who actually decides what's in the finished film once it's done? This is the part most people get completely wrong, so let's actually work through it. Whoever finances a film almost always retains something called final cut. Final cut just means exactly what it sounds like: the legal right to decide the version of the movie that actually gets released. Not the director, the producer, or the studio, or whoever put up the money. A first-time director essentially never gets this right. It's not even usually up for negotiation. Only a small handful of directors, the kind with a decade of proven box office behind them, ever get final cut written into their contract. Names like Scorsese or Spielberg. Everyone else delivers a cut, and then watches someone else decide if it's good enough. Even that isn't as settled as it sounds. Studios can order reshoots. They can test screen a film in front of a random audience and rewrite the ending based on the scorecards. They can shorten a film purely to fit one more screening into a theater's daily schedule. That poster that says a film by a specific director? Often, that's marketing language, not a legal claim. So somebody spends 3 years of their life on a project, and doesn't get the final say on what's actually in it. What's left for them to hold on to? Honestly, not much, except the work itself, and that's where the real cost of this job shows up. Directing eats years, not months. Pre-production alone can take a year before a single frame is shot, then months of actual filming, then another year buried in editing, sound, visual effects, marketing. That's not one bad month of stress. That's roughly 3 years of your life attached to a single outcome you don't fully control, and can't walk away from once you've started. Relationships strain under that kind of absence. Some don't survive an entire production cycle spent obsessing over a single project that isn't even guaranteed to come out well. And here's the part that makes it uniquely brutal, compared to most jobs. Your reputation is tied to a single opening weekend. Not your effort, not your growth, not how much you learned making the thing. Just 3 days of box office numbers, largely outside your control, that quietly decide whether you work again for the next 5 years. A film can flop for reasons that have nothing to do with the direction. A release date gets moved next to a bigger competitor. A marketing campaign undersells what the film actually is. None of that shows up on the director's resume as anyone else's fault. It shows up as theirs. And unlike a lot of jobs, there's no quiet middle ground here. You don't get a steady paycheck between projects. Between films, plenty of working directors are unemployed, pitching, waiting, hoping the last film was good enough to earn the next one. Meanwhile, the people around you keep living their lives on a normal schedule. Birthdays happen, weddings happen. Your own health sometimes gets pushed to whenever post-production finally wraps. The job doesn't pause for any of it, because the moment you stop, someone else is ready to take the slot you're standing in. So, knowing all of that, the lack of control, the years lost, the fact that even success buys you very little security. Why does anyone still want this job? Because the version of control this job actually offers isn't the fantasy version. It was never about commanding a set, or having the final word on a screen. It's about surviving enough rounds of being powerless on somebody else's project, until eventually, someone trusts you with a small piece of your own. That trust doesn't arrive all at once either. It builds one film at a time, and it can disappear just as fast as it was earned. This isn't a career for people who need certainty, or people who need credit. It's for people who can put years of invisible labor into something that might get taken out of their hands at the very end, and do it again anyway. The name above the title was never really the reward. Making it to the end of the film, with your vision even mostly intact, that's the actual prize. And almost nobody gets handed that on the first try.